Good evening, Mayor Frutos. Did you want to go ahead and start?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And my name is Bob Frutos. I'm the mayor of the city of Burbank. And on behalf of the entire city council, I am so excited to join you in wishing our great city a happy 110th anniversary. Happy birthday, Burbank. Yes, it is Burbank's birthday today. All month, we have some really fun activities planned to celebrate and most important, learn about the city we love of Burbank, of yesterday and today. In 1911, Burbank was incorporated as its own city, a move that allowed us to become a place we are today, with top-notch city services, great school district, beautiful neighborhoods, and thriving businesses. Our first mayor, Thomas Story, helped set us on the right path, and it's an honor that I follow the line of mayors through today of 2021. Mayor Story probably couldn't imagine the Burbank of today. In 1911, California's first film studio was just established, and today is the media capital of the world. In 1911, Los Angeles had recently hosted its first aviation exhibit, showcasing new technology. And who knew Burbank would become the center of cutting-edge aircraft design at Lockheed. In 1911, horses far outnumbered cars in the streets of the Southern California. And today, Burbank is home to West Coast Customs, creating some of the coolest vehicles around. We have so much we can be proud of as Burbank residents. Coming out through this very tough year of the pandemic, I invite you to reconnect with your city, Burbank. Please visit the sites, snap a selfie with our founder, Dr. David Burbank, and post it on social media. Get involved, get excited. When you complete the challenge, you can stop by any Burbank Public Library to pick up your commemorative coin celebrating 110 years of our great city. We're also looking for photos to capture Burbank. Please submit yours and you could be part of the 2022 calendar. It's all about Burbank. If you're looking for inspiration, all month, there's going to be fun facts about our history and it'll be posted on our social media. So get engaged, get involved. Speaking of fun facts, tonight I am so thrilled and excited to kick off our 110th anniversary, the birthday of Burbank, the events that we're going to go for the next month with two of the probably most top-notch guys that know more about history than the mayor. And these guys is Mike McDaniel and Wes Clark. They are going to give a presentation. And I'm telling you, every time I hear them, I get more inspired to follow the history of our city and appreciate our hometown of Burbank, California, even more. I want to thank them for being part of this great celebration for this month and for tonight, opening up the 110th anniversary of our city, and thank them for joining us tonight. I will now hand it over to Caroline to get this event started. Happy birthday, Burbank.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Mayor Frutos, for that great introduction. My name's Carolyn Alves. I'm the local history librarian here at Burbank Public Library. And welcome to tonight's program, Looking Back at Burbank. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so we can all enjoy this online program. You should see our speakers on the screen, and audience members, you'll not be able to speak, but you can use the Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Throughout the program, you're welcome to type in questions and we'll try to get them answered for you. At the end, when you leave the program, you will be redirected to an evaluation form, and we would greatly appreciate if you could fill it out to help us improve our programs of the future. Tonight, I want to welcome Mike McDaniel and Wesley Clark, Burbank history experts and authors of 3 books all about Burbank. They're here tonight to guide us in a look back at what they love most about our city. To celebrate the anniversary, the city has designed a selfie tour, as the mayor showed you, with Dr. David Burbank, and we want to use it to introduce locals to new places and to allow residents to share some of their favorite hotspots from around town. I'm going to direct some of the questions we have on our hunt directly to Mike and Wes to get the evening started. So one of the locations we ask people is what is their favorite place to eat? So growing up in Burbank and looking back at Burbank, Mike and Wes, what is your favorite place to eat in Burbank?
Martino's?
You mean this place?
Yeah, that place.
That place? Yeah. Tell them about tea cakes.
Gotta have a tea cake. They're only made here. And my favorite thing about tea cakes is they're good as cash in other states where you find people who used to live here and are very familiar with tea cakes. They will allow you to stay with them for a very long time if you bring them a dozen.
One of the things that comes up on the Burbank Facebook groups, it's a constant battle, is somebody will ask innocently, is it Burbanker or Burbankian? And this just starts off like 200 answers and responses. It's a huge thing. Now, we've always claimed it's actually Burbanker because we saw this used in an 1880s newspaper. But the settlement that I came upon, the solution to this issue was that if you make one a noun and the other one an adjective, it works out really well. For instance, if you have a gathering of Burbankers, you can make it more Burbankian by bringing tea cakes.
There you go. Awesome.
So that ties in this whole Burbankian with Martino's and the tea cakes.
Absolutely. Okay. So as we all know, Burbank is the media capital of the world. What would you say is your favorite or most memorable filming location here in Burbank?
Well, there's many, in my opinion. You've got the Wonder Years house, an old television show, which is very fondly thought of by many people. I was able to kind of feel, because the boy is Wes and our age in the show.
He's exactly our age.
Exactly our age. And my locker at John Muir was 2 down from where his locker was in the show. And so it always struck really close to home to me. And I don't know, you can see all sorts. City Hall is another famous place. It's used as council chamber is used as courtrooms in probably 5 or 6 different shows and movies I've seen. And you always are forever seeing a chase going down through Burbank streets. The A-Team was very popular for that. They raced through Burbank like mad. And another one was my favorite, was a jump that took place on the Olive Avenue Bridge where they were going at a high rate of speed in a police chase. They jumped the top of the bridge, which is physically impossible. But when they came down, they were on the Magnolia Bridge. And unless you lived here, you wouldn't notice because the bridges are identical. And that's always struck me. That's the best jump I've ever seen. Straight up and 4 blocks to the west and down. And amazing stuff that the movies can do.
Well, Carolyn, you came up with a good one. You pointed out how the Golden Mall was used in a 1985 episode of Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. And if you go to our Burbankia website and look in videos, you'll see that there's a Burbankia playlist. And I grabbed that specific spot where this guy's trying to warn Burbankers about the Alamo in modern days. And it's pretty funny because he's riding along a horse on the Golden Mall and some extra yells, "Ride 'em, cowboy!" as he heads up Olive Avenue or someplace like that. That was pretty funny. And then there's the Safari Inn, the home of T.J. Hooker. We can't forget about that. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was also used as the home for Officer Riggs in Lethal Weapon. The TV series, not the movie. But
getting back to the Wonder Years, one of my favorite, anybody who's seen that show remembers the math teacher episodes. There was a story arc about an algebra teacher that Kevin had. And his last meeting with this algebra teacher was in the parking lot in front of Burroughs High. That was pretty cool too. Quality television. Good show, that.
Another one that I remember mentioning, the Golden Mall, was one of the last episodes of the A-Team series, TV series, was filmed down there, and they transformed the area between Orange Grove and Palm into Hanoi, which They did it, but I don't know. When you were looking at it from a distance, it didn't look so good. But when you saw it on the television, it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
We're going to step away from favorites for 1 second because we do have an audience question.
Okay.
And Corey is asking, where is the mine?
Yeah, well, let's explain what he's talking about. When Mike and I were doing at least I think I know what he's talking about. When Mike and I were doing a slideshow and we were taking questions, what happens is we always learn something new from Burbankers. And a gentleman who was, I think, in his 90s came up to us and said, "How come you didn't say anything about the, what was it, the Crystal Cave?" And Mike and I looked at each other. We could, the what?
Yeah.
And we did some research, and turns out that there's some old timers remember that there was a cave in Burbank. I guess it was filled with mica. It caused such a problem with youth going in there and getting trapped, and they'd have to get rescued, that they walled it up before World War II, which shows you how long ago this was. Now, there's a connection with that cave with a mine. And I'm not sure how much of an urban legend it is, but Corey knows the next time I'm in town, the three of us are going to mount an expedition. We have some sites to look for that mine, look for that Crystal Cave, or whatever's left.
There's also the one, Wes, if you remember, there's also the one up at the Lovejoy Castle.
Right. And
That's an actual mine, just a shaft.
I wasn't going to mention that because years ago I got permission from the landowner to mention the Lovejoy Castle, and he specifically said, "Don't say anything about any precious metals located. I don't want all sorts of people tromping around on my real estate." So,
okay, sorry. I'll scratch that. You can edit that out, I think.
yeah. But hi, Corey. Corey is one of our researchers, by the way. He's a sharp guy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And he's relentless.
Yeah, he is relentless.
All right. If you could go back in the 70s and take a selfie at your favorite shop, what would it be?
Oh, the Dip.
Well, that's a restaurant.
The
Is that a
Dip.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
the
a place to
street
eat.
food diner that everybody remembers so fondly with that huge garish neon sign at the 5 Points. And yeah, the pastrami. I only ever had vanilla shakes there. And to be real honest, I fell in love with the gal who worked there. She was married to a cop, and she moved like a ballerina. And the reason was that she actually was classically trained as a dancer. So I used to go there every day and get a vanilla shake from her and just...
I'd like to go back to some of the old antique stores that were around.
Magnolia.
Jim's Used Things was
Yeah.
one that was on the middle of Glen Oaks between Olive and Angeleno. And then
That
there was
was a favorite of yours.
there was a beautiful Victorian house on the corner of Verdugo and Glen Oaks that they had turned into a multi-level. All the bedrooms had antiques in them and everything. And they were fun to go through. Now you can still do that down on Magnolia, but they weren't the type of places like they are now. They were more geared towards antiques, old houses, old buildings, you know.
They're much trendier now. Magnolia is a much trendier place than it was in the 60s.
Yeah,
I
very
used to go
hip.
to antique stores with my mom on Magnolia all the time. That was always fun. And there were a ton of antique stores there.
Yeah, I'd love to have a picture of me in front of Jim's Used Things. That would have been great.
Yeah. I don't think I was ever in the place, but I remember you were very fond of it.
Yeah.
You used to get World War II memorabilia from there.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Got a lot
that's
out
why.
of there too.
Yeah.
He once also got me a Civil War musician's sword that he found in a trash can in Burbank. Just, you never know.
Now a note about trash cans. Mike's wife works at the Burbank Public Library, so he knows of a dumpster where they tend to throw out books sometimes, and he's recovered some books and mailed them off to me. I guess the Burbank gets donated books, and some of them they can't always use, and some of them they age out for various reasons because shelf space is limited. And yeah, he's mailed them out to me, so I've been the recipient of some great Burbank books from a dumpster in back of a Burbank library.
And Wes is a voracious reader.
Ah.
So,
Yeah, and not only a reader, but a listener. And there's something I wanted to mention. I promised Carolyn I would give the public library a real note here. One of my favorite spots in Burbank growing up was always the Central Library. And I was a big library patron. I used to spend hours in that place. And they had an AV room where they had a big collection of records. I remember they had Alice Cooper records, and they were on the shelves along with classical music records. And I sort of got interested in classical music by going to the Burbank Public Library, and it's been a lifelong interest. And today, I traded in an old turntable that I had, and I bought a brand new turntable. And as I was assembling it, listening to records, I was thinking back on the Burbank Public Library, where I used to get all of these records. Some of them I still listen to, believe it or not, to this very day. So go Burbank Library. One of the big influences in my life. And by the way, I am just enormously thrilled to visit the library and see our books on the shelves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We actually have an end cap with your books right now for the birthday, for the
Oh,
anniversary.
Oh, Mike, get a picture.
I got
Mike, get a picture.
selfie.
Get a
There's your
picture.
selfie. There's your selfie. Oh my gosh, yes. Do you have a favorite civic building, Mike?
Well, I have to say I love City Hall for all of its nooks and crannies. And see, there's places in there that most people will never go. And having worked there for so many years, I was allowed to get into a lot of the strange places, like the old police station down there still has the perpetrator walk, where you have to stand in front of it and they take your photo with the bars on the wall that tell how tall you are. And there's the holding cell down there that has scratches. We have pictures of that on Burbankia. Scratches of people scratching their name and the year that they were incarcerated in there. And I get a kick out of the fact that the clerk stores their records in the cells, which is, all the bars are still there except for the doors, but it's kind of cute to go down there and see all these perfectly manicured shelves with all these records inside a jail cell. I guess that's how important they are. We keep them safe. So
one of Mike's stories that I like so much, I recorded him telling it and I put it on the Burbankia YouTube playlist, is the epic battle between the rat and the Burbank City Hall rat.
Yeah, that was an interesting story.
The nuts and shoes rat.
Yeah, this rat was down in the basement in the print shop, and he would come down. We had a box of See's candy one time for Christmas, and he chewed the lid off of the corner so he could lift the lid up, but he only ate the nuts and chews. He wouldn't eat the creams. And Public Works tried trapping him any number of ways, and they never were able to catch him. And then finally, we quit putting food out, and then they quit putting food in the traps. And so he gnawed on the side of one of the traps and basically choked to death. Sad tale. And we gave him a proper funeral as a worthy opponent out there. We made him a little box coffin, and he's still buried under the back parking lot. And I won't disclose the location.
There you go. And how many Burbankers know that story? There is a rat buried under the parking lot behind your City Hall.
Yep.
A worthy adversary.
Flag draped coffin. So.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Something we're asking our residents to do is to tell us what their favorite park is. And do you guys have a favorite park, and what's your memory of one of the Burbank parks?
You lead this. You've got your favorite park.
Yeah, Vicroy Park, the smallest park in Burbank. It was
the first.
The first. It was only about a half block from where I was, and I practically grew up there. And there's a tree. Sadly, it's no longer there, but I used to climb that thing, and there was a perch on the very top of that tree where I could sit. And it was almost like there was another branch. It was almost like a little desk I could lean on. And in the top of this tree, I could see all the goings on taking place on Lincoln Street, on my street. And I fell in love with the girl across the street, Vicky Gardeman. Yes, Vicky Gardeman. And on that tree was a VG plus WC around Circle by a Heart, but alas, it was never to be. She went on and married someone else, a Burbank City employee, in fact. And yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, that's my favorite one. Vicroy Park. Spent many hours there. Mike?
My favorite's McCambridge, formerly Glen Oaks Park originally. And I can't count how many events I've attended there. My kids all played baseball there. I played baseball there to start back in the 60s. We used to hold huge 4th of July celebrations down there. They'd bring in airplanes, they'd bring in tanks, they'd bring in soldiers and big bands. And it was quite an event. And you could walk around in the main gymnasium up there, and they had all of these documents, copies of the Declaration, copy of the Bill of Rights. And I think that would be a good thing if we had stuff like that still, because back in those days, that's where I got my first exposure to government and, what made our country.
And Mike, that was called Documents of Freedom. There was some civic organization that did those. We had one of those in Luther Burbank as well.
Yeah. And they had it up in City Hall for a while, but it's down now. I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, then I became interested in the veterans events, and McCambridge Park hosts the Veterans Memorial there. And I have been a big supporter, and I've sat on the Veterans Committee supporting the park there for 30 years now. And I can't say enough about McCambridge Park. It's been a big portion of my life.
And there's a plug as well. If you go on Burbankia's site, one of the documents that we have linked on the very first page is Mike's book about Burbank veterans. And all of the work that he's done capturing the history of veterans is captured in that book. It is the best single source for who took part in Burbank's wars and who sacrificed his life in Korea, World War I, World War II, global war on terror, Vietnam.
Just recently, I came into possession of 2 scrapbooks from the World War I War Widows chapter of Burbank. And it's an amazing book. I never heard of this organization before. No. I never knew anything about it. It faded out probably in the 70s at the latest, because the war widows were passing away and the mothers. And anyway, I found out by reading it, I found 4 more names of World War I veterans from Burbank who lost their life in World War I, and we have never been able to recognize. I was hoping to be able to read their names this past Memorial Day, but that didn't happen because of COVID. But in the future, I'm sure we will get them on the program so that their names can be remembered. First time in literally over 100 years. And so that's, I can't say enough good. If you haven't visited the Veterans Memorial there, you need to go there and see the names of the people who sacrificed so that we can go there and can be here today.
Yeah, there's a bit of information there too. One thing I want to mention is a constant. We started Burbankia in 2003, and one thing we've noticed is just when we think we know it all or we've seen it all, something new comes to light. And there's this new alley, this new passage in Burbank history that we didn't know about before. Mike came into, he was exposed to some of the photography of a fellow named Delos Wilbur, who took pictures in 1917. And now we know a lot more about Burbank because of those photographs.
Yeah, and those were found in a very strange place. They were in a military show in Bellflower. Yeah. And the guy was a World War I veteran. He was also one of the first 12 graduates of Burbank High when it became Burbank High. He was in the first actual official graduating class that went full years there. And he was an avid photographer, and he shot tons of shots of Burbank. And sadly to say, I think a lot of what he shot was lost. But these that we have on there, we have a whole section dedicated to him because he took fantastic photos and documented them too. He had the time of day they were shot, where they were shot, where the sun was, and the whole 9 yards. He was very efficient.
Very precise photographer.
Wow.
The other thing I wanted to mention is new photos keep coming to light. You wouldn't think so, but we were at Viceroy Park, Mike and I, one time, and there was this house that my parents always liked, and I always liked
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And we knocked on the door, a cold call, two complete strangers. This lady answered the door, and I told her that, I grew up in this neighborhood. My parents always liked her house. And she's looking at us. She says, I know you guys. You're the history guys, aren't you? I've got something for you. And she ran off and then reappeared with this photo that she obtained somewhere. And it's a photo never before seen. The Burbank Historical Society doesn't even have it. It was an alternate view of the aerial swallow, which was Joseph Wesley Fox monorail. It was a suspended mass transit proposal he came up with, completely new photograph we'd never seen before. So she gave it to us, we give it to the Historical Society. So new things keep coming to light in the strangest ways.
Yeah, just when you think it's over,
It's not
something new
over.
pops up. Burbank has such a deep, extensive history. It's weird, all of the things that have happened here or started here or were thought of or designed or brought to life here. I'm just going to pick one of the strange things. The Starship Enterprise was built here on Verdugo Avenue, and we've got great pictures of the guys rolling it out before it was ever filmed in any episodes of Star Trek, sitting right there in the middle of the street.
And the neat thing about Burbank history is we did some deeper digging about the craftsmen who appeared with this gigantic studio.
Yes, and that
model of the
started a whole
Enterprise.
new thing.
Turns out one of them, his name was Vern Sion. He was a handyman who once took part in a 1951 Burbank contest of some kind. He shaved his beard so that it said Burbank in facial hair. He's one of the craftsmen who built the Enterprise. Another guy, I think his name was Jensen, I forget. As it turns out, he was a pioneer in ultralight craft. He started building ultralight so that they were much safer. He came up with alternative designs. And it's just fantastic. Burbank history is fascinating.
So we have some questions I missed from the public because we were involved in so many things. But so Caesar wants to know, where is Martino's? I know, Caesar.
The originals or where it is today?
Where it is today.
I don't know. It just says, where is Martino's?
Where you and I have breakfast, Mike. Every time I'm
Closest
out
to
there.
Victory and Magnolia. Anyway, there it is. I would say there's a gas station, a Texaco station, I think it is, on the corner of Magnolia and Victory, and it's directly next to it.
And for the record, neither one of us have ever gotten a tea cake for free. All of this publicity.
Free advertising.
We've never gotten a tea cake for free. If there's anybody at Martino's, we've never gotten a tea cake for free.
All right, Eric says, hi guys. And what does Burbank have now that you wish you had back in high school?
Ooh.
Well, it's tempting to say the internet because it makes research so easy, but it's kind of a pat answer. What does my wife? It would have been nice to have known my wife in high school, but she was in a different part of California, and although the funny thing about my wife was she has Burbank roots as well. Her father worked at Lockheed, he worked at the Vega plant, and then her grandmother also worked at Lockheed, and she used to visit. She lived in Burbank. She used to visit her, and we were apparently at Viceroy Park at the same time on some of the same days, perhaps, but completely oblivious to one another. So my wife.
I have an anonymous attendee wants to know if you guys can speak about Monte Carlo's Deli, Pinocchio's restaurant.
Oh, Wes, take that one. That's your favorite place.
We dine there every time we go there. First of all, what I love is a genuine Italian atmosphere. It's great. And that place, I can tell you, we used to dine there. My parents would take me there back in the mid 60s. And the corks that are on the wall, they've been on that wall since 1967. The framed pictures of the World War I aircraft on the opposite wall. They've been there since 1966 or so. It's never changed. The food's great, and it's a constant. Monte Carlo is wonderful. Monte Carlo / Pinocchio. I guess one is a store, the other one's a restaurant. Yeah. It's never been clear to me which one is which, and I've never gotten a free meal there either.
I bought my pizza pans in the store there, the ones that we make homemade pizza on, and we used to get our dough there and sauce, and you get their cheese, and their cheese is spectacular because it's so fresh.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, I have an anonymous attendee who says, I'm a newcomer to Burbank. When was Burbank founded, and what was the main industry when it was founded?
Ooh, farming.
Yeah.
Yeah, farming
Alfalfa.
was its, yeah, farming,
Cantaloupe.
Pumpkins. Cantaloupe was the first city seal, which I've always loved that seal. I think that we should go back to the cantaloupe. It was great.
Cantaloupe, yeah, it has nothing to do with Burbank nowadays, but
yeah, but it sure did back then.
But they're tasty. Yeah, Burbank farming almost exclusively. If you do research on earliest Burbank, you'll find that farming was a garlic. There was a garlic processing plant, and it stunk up the entire town. Literally, you would come into the airport and you could smell garlic everywhere. And there were stories about how the garlic would permeate people's closets and make its way into clothing. And this didn't last for long, but it was a notable thing. So all sorts. And then what was it? James J. Jeffries had an alfalfa ranch. He was growing alfalfa. That didn't really take off like he wanted to. So he started exporting bulls and steers to Mexico. So he became an international businessman, Burbank's first.
Yeah, years ago, McDonald's was importing beef from Argentina, and they got a lot of flack from the public over it, and because it wasn't USDA choice beef. And I pointed out to those people that most of those beef that are in Argentina came from Burbank originally.
Yeah.
Because all of the bulls that went sent down there by James Jeffries Enterprises, that's what brought him to Burbank in the first place. He bailed out his friend's alfalfa farm that was going under, and he bought all these prize longhorn beef. There's so many pictures of Jeffries playing with the longhorn cattle. If he isn't riding one, he was boxing with one that had gloves on the end of its horns, and he's in the ring for charity. And Jeffries, he was
an amazing guy,
larger than life. He started the first basically animal shelter here in Burbank, and he had animal shows where the pets were for sale and things, and he made sure that the animals were taken care of, and he did so much. He had rodeos for the Elks Club. Everything he did for charity, and he used his property widely, and then he created that barn which brought in commerce to the city, and he held boxing and wrestling matches there.
And he trained young boxers. As insofar as boxing is concerned, his one of his most celebrated bouts was actually a loss to Jack Johnson, but he was past his boxing prime when he entered into that fight. He probably shouldn't have. But when he was in his prime, I've read that most boxing experts still claim that pound for pound, he was one of the greatest heavyweight champions that America's ever produced. An outstanding, a real bull of a man, just incredible physical feats.
He was over 6 feet tall, and we're talking 1900. He was born in the late 1800s, and he was over 6 feet tall. He weighed nearly 300 pounds, and he was what we would call buff today.
Yeah.
And his favorite thing to do was to pick up a phone pole and run a few miles with it on his shoulder to develop his legs so he could stand up in the ring.
He was a beast.
But he was kind to a fault. The city would, because he was an international star, he was the big rock star in his time. The city used him to go negotiate deals for equipment and the materials and stuff that the city needed. And they would send James Jeffries because there wasn't a person on earth who would say no to him.
Yeah, the champ. He when he was a boxer, he was celebrated for being able to take an abnormal amount of punishment. He could take the blows and still keep on his feet during a fight. That was one of his traits that he was noted for. Pretty a legendary guy, really legendary.
If you're ever down on the corner of Buena Vista and Victory, his home is memorialized in the name of the shopping center. They call it the Landmark Center because that's where his house was. And in its day, it was a landmark. Presidents and baseball players, tons of famous people would come there and visit with him because he was such a star.
And you can also see the interior of his barn used in an occasional film. For instance, I think it was a 1938-39 John Garfield film called They Made Me a Criminal, I believe that was the name of it. All these films noir have these colloquial titles, but there's a Garfield film with the Dead End Kids, and the boxing scene in that was filmed in the inside of Jeffrey's barn.
And you can still see the barn, because the barn was moved after Jeffrey's death to Knott's Berry Farm by Walter K. Knott himself.
And
he oversaw yeah. And anyway, it's still there today. It's called the Wilderness Dance Hall, but that's actually Jeffrey's barn.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Anna Lee wants to know, how was Burbank affected by the 1918 pandemic?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Well, let's see.
Don't know.
I don't think we've ever come. I can't remember any records about Burbank and that pandemic. We know that there's a really good Penguin book called The Great Influenza. That's if you want to read about the 1918 pandemic, that's the one to read. And after you're finished with it, you won't want to venture out of your bedroom because it was really, really horrible. It was an amazing thing. And apparently it may have started in Kansas. It's called the Spanish flu because Spain was not clamped down on their papers. So they were reporting fatalities in a way that the combatants in World War I were not. Germany wasn't, the United States wasn't, because you don't want to telegraph to your enemy how many people you're losing due to this pandemic. But Spain was reporting their numbers. And so it got to be known as the Spanish flu, even though Spain had nothing to do with starting it. It apparently started in Kansas as a result of many young men being packed closely together in barracks, preparing to go overseas to fight in World War I. Now, Burbank in 1918 was not heavily populated. It was rather sparsely populated. It was a growing city, but you would still not refer to it as a large town. So I'm guessing that the effects of the influenza in Burbank were probably not all that great. You don't read much about it.
No.
We've never come across. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
That's actually a good, I'm going to write that one down.
We will look it up.
I'm going to write that one down.
One thing though, while Wes is writing, that I noted is Burbank wasn't great on their record keeping back in those days. One of my favorite things was a council minutes on the end of World War I. It said that they paused for a moment of silence and continued the discussion on pigs in the yard. And they didn't mention why they had a moment of silence, nothing, but that was their whole thing. And then we went right on with why we can't have pigs in our front yard.
Now remember, Lockheed hadn't come along yet. That would be almost 10 years later. And so there wasn't a real national security, we weren't one of the arrows in the quiver of the eagle at the time. So yeah. It was farmland, ranchland, heavily agricultural in 1918.
I would suspect, though, that it probably wasn't a big deal. That's just a guess on my part. Yeah. But because of the sparse population, I seriously doubt if they had a big flu pandemic here.
Yeah, we rarely come in mention of anything like that at that time period.
All right, Corey wants to know where in Burbank the variegated pink lemon was discovered.
Oh, yeah. Trader Joe's still sells them, actually, the variegated pink lemon. Where in Burbank? Corey, you always ask. You tell us, Corey. This is another research challenge for you. Yeah, where exactly was it? I would like to know that, but there was some rancher who was messing around with lemon hybrids and came up with a pink one and managed to breed it so that it was a consistent variety of lemon. And I don't think there was a location. Well, you'd have to find the ranch. We know who it was. I think we know the name of the rancher.
Yeah, it's on Burbankia, but I don't remember it
It's
off
in
my head.
Burbankia. You just have to, Corey. You would need to find that rancher's ranch, Corey.
Yeah, his follow-up says that it was D.W. Fields who founded it.
Okay.
But okay. Katie wants to know that she says it seems like the I-5 is always under construction. And can you talk about when it first went in?
Mike.
Here we go. One of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, he's the I-5 expert here.
Anyway, first of all, there's a sign on the corner of Magnolia and San Fernando Road that the city put up that said, this is Highway 99, historic Highway 99. That is completely false. Highway 99 followed exactly the Golden State Freeway's location currently. If you go out on San Fernando Road to Carl's Jr. and the corner of McCambridge Park and Carl's Jr. Amherst right there, you'll notice there's a street that kind of veers off to nowhere on the right on an angle. Well, that was where the business loop of Highway 99 went. Burbank didn't want all those big trucks and everything going down the one lane road that was San Fernando Road through the center of town. So they ferried them out and around. And so Highway 99 went out. They always talk about that hellacious curve there that they're trying to straighten out, which is what the construction's all about now. And that curve was actually the original Highway 99 going around there. There are several photos on Burbankia showing there's like one motorcycle officer down there, because highway then is not like freeway now. Highway was back in those days was more like a elongated street with less stop signs.
In-grade crossings, that sort of
Yeah, in-grade crossings.
I think we call it a parkway.
There's a picture also on Burbankia taken from the top of one of the buildings there, looking down towards, and you can see actually the difference in the street, the highway, and San Fernando Road, and all of them are distanced, and it gives you a very good idea. And see, the state had to pay no money. They didn't have to eminent domain anybody to put that portion of the 5 there, because they already owned it. It was already a state Highway 99. And so the bottom line is it skirted around Burbank and came back up over in Glendale. And so they just used the natural land, which they already owned, because that's how I got to Burbank. My parents' backyard out in Sun Valley, where they first moved to California in 1946, was right on the Hollywood Way off-ramp there, and Hollywood Way in the South 5. And the state came along and eminent domained my parents and kicked them out, and they had to find a place to live, and I'm sitting in it. This is the house that they found, and I've been here for 65 years, but had the Golden State Freeway not come, I wouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting. So anyway, and that's the way the 5 came in and about started when construction in 1959, right, through Burbank in that area, 58 to 59, and then was operable in the early 60s, about 1963. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think the dates are correct. One other comment, the reason why, there was a good reason why the city fathers didn't want all the traffic through Burbank, which is probably memories of when they used to move cattle and farm animals down San Fernando Road. There's a history written up by the Security Bank, and they used to talk about how they would have to close the doors, draw all the windows, because all of these animals created all this dust that was picked up in the street, and it was blown into the bank, and it was very rural and very nasty, and dry horse poop, dry cow poop. I have a book called The Good Old Days, They Were Awful, and it describes New York City being, when the wagons were hauled by horses, the horse droppings would dry, and then it would get mashed into sort of a powder. This powder would be lifted and it would be blown about through the air. Well, the same thing was happening in Burbank when Burbank was heavily agricultural, and there were farm animals going down San Fernando Road. So that's what the city fathers were thinking, I'm sure.
Okay, we have a question from a future historian.
Good.
Charlotte, age 9, would like to know what the population of Burbank was in 1911.
Oh.
I'd say
1911.
just a best educated guess, I'd say between 5 and 9,000, and that's probably a little on the high side. Maybe 3 to 5,000 would probably be more sufficient.
Carolyn, you could probably pull that one up really quickly by the looking at Burbankia and going to the history of Burbank, the 1967 book that you and I
A
know
History
about.
of Burbank.
By the way, who was the uncredited author of that book?
Her name is Dolores Palmer.
Dolores Palmer.
Mhm.
Right. She's not credited as being the author of that very excellent 1967 book, A History of Burbank. But I'm guessing if anybody has that figure, it's in that book.
Oh, well, look, I have many copies of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, while I'm looking, can you speak about Burbank's time capsule?
Oh, we've got that. Yeah, the 1959 time capsule. Yeah, we've got that. There is a page on Burbankia. Now, once again, Burbankia, that's our website. You get to it by going to Bing, type in Burbankia, and it'll take you to it. Or go to wesclark.com. That's me. And then click on the Burbankia website link. That'll take you there too. And where there's a Google search box, just type in 1959 time capsule or time capsule. What happened was it was on microfilm. They dug it out of the side of a bridge. It was in a concrete compartment in a bridge. I don't remember if it was Burbank Bridge. It may have been Burbank. And they sent it off to Warner Brothers, who processed the film and came up with nice blown up images of it. And all of the images are on Burbankia for that time capsule. And it also made the local papers too.
The population in 1920 in Burbank, according to the research here, was 2,900 in 1920. So that means 1911, it was probably less than 2,000, maybe even. Is just an educated guess. But the actual number for 1920 was 2,900, 2,900 people.
Yeah, we don't have these facts at hand mentally, but we know where to find them.
There's a lot of history we've actually forgotten.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the process of writing these books, we had this stuff at our fingertips, but life
The
understands.
Encyclopedia Britannica says that in 1911, the population of Burbank was 2,000.
Okay.
Bingo.
All righty.
All right. Nailed that one.
Nathaniel
Well
has
done,
a
Carolyn.
question. Does the street Rosemary Lane have anything to do with the actress Rosemary Lane?
Oh.
There's an
Oh.
interesting one.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Maybe. There was an actress in Burbank who, and I can't remember her name. It's on Burbankia. Once again, it's also in our third book. She was a silent era film star, and she built some property. Fatty Arbuckle said, while the rest of us were having parties, she took our money and bought real estate. And she built a home in Burbank and created a concrete vault in her backyard, stored films there. And then 40 years later, they recovered a lot of those films, and there were a lot of things that had gone lost. The only copy we have is from this lady's film vault, and I can't remember her name. But Rosemary Lane, she wouldn't have been one of the actresses, one of the starlets who was involved in publicizing Magnolia Park, was she? I don't know that we've come across that name.
I haven't. That name doesn't ring a bell, but there were a lot of starlets at the time, silent film stars, who were used by Mr. White in promotion of Magnolia Park. We've got tons of pictures of them too.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too. They're playing horseshoes or,
checkers with
checkers, and
one was a crossing guard. I like that one.
Yeah. There's a gal. She looks like a flapper, and she's helping children across the street in Burbank. And then also there were some starlets used in the Benmar promotional
Yes.
as well, I believe. So,
Okay, an anonymous attendee says, I live on North Florence Street, 1947 World War II tract housing, just west of Buena Vista. And oh no, the question disappeared.
oh no.
I think she wanted to know if you knew where to find photos of that area. from the map.
Yeah, we get questions like that a lot. I live on Lincoln Street. Are there any old photos of my house? Generally, no. They weren't really taking pictures of houses. It's a rare home that gets documented really well. For instance, the Stone House up on, what is it, Orange Grove, Mike?
Olive
Olive.
Avenue, the two stone homes.
Yeah, it's unique, so that gets some photo documentation. The little Hansel and Gretel houses along, what is it, Chandler, I believe.
Yes.
Those get some photo love because
Millionaires Row on Angelino.
Millionaires Row. That's what De Los Wilbur called the expensive housing. But typically, a lot of the homes that went up in Burbank, there aren't a lot of photos of them.
If you look on Burbankia, though, you will find we have a section of aerial shots. And
Yeah.
if you look in the aerial shots, there's a lot of them. I would also recommend that they look through the cities, and it's online on the GIS site for the city, the 1928. Well, we linked to it on Burbankia.
We
now.
linked to it on Burbankia.
It's the 1928 aerial map. It was a map done by the federal government. Some guy in a biplane with a camera hanging out over the side, shooting photographs in a grid pattern.
And they are very detailed.
They are spectacular. You
Yeah,
can
they
come
are.
right down on top of them. He used whatever camera he had at the time, did a great job.
Well,
But-
it would have been a large format camera probably, because that's what they had back then.
Mike Carson in the city's GIS, he glued them all together so it makes one perfect big map. He's to be very credited for that because he did an excellent job. You can lay modern streets over it, so you can see even in the dirt sections, you can see where the streets are now. So.
And how do you get to it on Burbankia? You go to Burbankia, you look in aerial, go to Burbankia, click on photos, then you'll see a link for aerial shots. Go there, and I think that's where it's located.
But it's a great map. You can see the Jeffries home and his extensive holdings, the barn. You can see all sorts of things that are no longer here.
If your house is old enough. A
Yeah.
lot of homes like the one I grew up in, they were sort of thrown up in 1940 because those were boom years, and not a lot of documentation for them. If however, you want to learn about 1631 North Lincoln Street, there are plenty of pictures there. It's called Avocado Memories, and I've heavily documented the house in which I grew up.
All right, I have an anonymous attendee who wants to know if you could tell us a little bit about the Chandler Bike Path Old Railroad.
We have an article about that.
Yes.
Once again, if you go to Burbankia and then look in the Google and then type Chandler, it's named for Otis Chandler, who was once the largest landowner in California, an enormously wealthy man. And the bike path, well, it used to be where the railroad tracks were. I think everybody knows that, bike paths. And we have an article somewhere on Burbankia that describes the process by which that train, that line, that spur went into operation. How would you find it? Yeah, just type in Chandler and that should take you to it.
One of the major things that was that spur was used for was supplying raw materials to the Oro Wheat factory
Yeah, right.
that was at the very end of Chandler, right
Right.
where Burbank ends and North Hollywood starts was this huge plant. And they baked all the Oro Wheat breads back in the day. And that end of town smelled really good.
And another feature that we want to mention here is there's also a lot of lore. We get a lot of lore from people about our age or a little bit older about how they used to do freight hopping. The trains would stop there, people would jump on the boxcars and then go for a ride somewhere. Burbank had a lot of hobos back in the day, starting during the Depression. There's a movie that was made in 1942 called Wings of the Eagle. And there were two gentlemen who want to work at the Lockheed plant. How do they get there? They jump off a boxcar. That's one of the very first, Don DeFore, and I think it's Jack Oakey, I forget who. They jump off a boxcar and then they walk over to the Lockheed plant and get jobs. Boxcars back during the Depression there was a sizable number of the population in America getting on boxcars and freight hopping across the country looking for work. Now, Burbank had a lot of hobos, and we have photos of, unfortunately, freight hopping is extremely dangerous, and the railroad engineers would write about and talk about seeing amputated limbs alongside the tracks or bodies. We cover that as well. So there was a lot of transportation going on in Burbank on boxcars.
There was a junction underneath, basically in the LA River, by under the Olive Avenue Bridge, heading over towards the Public Works Yard down there. Right. And that was called Hobo Jungle. And that's where the hobos would live, because it's close to the train tracks, and it was down below grade, so they couldn't be seen, and they would live there. And I knew a man by the name of Fermer Kellogg, who was 100 years old. And Fermer told me the tale that his mother's name was written down under there because she would give food for yard work. And the hobos would go up to their house on Fairmount and offer to cut her bushes, mow her lawn, and take care of her property in return for a fresh meal, homemade meal. And so a lot of that took place back in those days.
One other story is there was a Burbanker who captured a really neat story about how when she was a little girl, she became friends with another little girl in elementary school. And she asked her one time, she wanted to visit her, where do you live? And the girl mentioned that she lived in a boxcar in the area that Mike's talking about. And so there were families who were living in boxcars in that part of Burbank. And she said the next day she was gone, obviously a transient family. And she always wondered what happened to her. So there are a lot of neat stories like that. Burbank was a very different place. Today, it is very white collar. There's a lot of creative effort going in Burbank, a lot of affluence. Burbank's a different place than it was back when Mike and I grew up. When we grew up, Lockheed had a lot of jobs that were blue collar, working class, and there were a lot of vacant lots in Burbank, and it wasn't as pretty a place then as it is now. We just sort of see it through rose-colored glasses.
So we're coming to the close of our hour, but will you take two more questions before we?
Oh,
okay.
We'll go for another half hour if you're
okay. Oh yeah, we're obviously we're no problem.
All right. We have one anonymous attendee says, do you know what happened to the gold van? About something about trophies and coins.
We know exactly where it is.
Yeah, okay. We know exactly where it is. Tell him, Mike, it's in a museum.
Okay, it's at the Peterson Car Museum in downtown-ish LA. It's not downtown LA exactly, but look up the Peterson Car Museum and it's there. It's in their holding area down in the basement. It's not one of their display cars, but it is in there. So, and I remember that van when it first came along because it was up in this neighborhood by the photo art shop on San Fernando Road, if I remember correctly. And I think the guy worked at one of the vacuum cleaner repair place that was there.
He was an amateur bodybuilder as well.
Yeah, he was an amateur bodybuilder.
He has pictures of himself posing next to his van.
He started off just riveting silver dollars to the side of it. And then whatever piece of metal he found, he riveted it on top of everything else till I don't know how the thing even ran because it was probably 65 tons.
Wasn't his name Shoemaker or something? I had to get in contact with one of his relatives in order to get the rights to use a photograph in one of our books.
Right.
But that's the other thing. The question that's not asked is if you remember the van, you probably also remember the Old Trappers Lodge. So what happened to all that weird art that was at the Old Trappers Lodge? Well, it's at Pierce
College out in the valley.
College. Mike and I visited it. And so that's where the Old Trappers artwork is. And that's worth a visit too.
Yeah, it's not in Burbank and you have to travel
Yeah.
a little bit out to the valley.
Technically,
But
it's I think what was it, a third of a mile outside of the city boundaries? But
yeah, so we adopted it
yeah,
because
well, Mike and I were talking about whether we should include it in our last book, and Mike said, "Well, it's not like anybody's going to do a book about Sunland."
Sun
So we
Valley.
adopted it.
All right. What can you tell us about J.M. Thrasher? Is he responsible for Magnolia Park?
No. White. What was his first name, Wes? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, Jack
Mr. White.
KLW, Jack L. His radio call sign were his initials. He was the
Yeah.
power behind. He was the main guy who was a rah-rah behind Magnolia Park.
Yeah,
But
he laid it out. He pushed it out. He hired actresses to come in and sell property and draw people to them because they were famous at the time. Hundreds of pictures of actresses and all the different things that were going on down there in Magnolia Park. They were the first local radio station they had down there, which boasted Burbank stuff and played what was the Burbank Civic Opera or Burbank Municipal Orchestra?
If you look at the third book that we did, True Tales from Burbank, it's the one on the right side of Mike's picture there. We talk about that radio station in detail, and also Magnolia Park. I don't remember the name Thrasher as much as I remember the name White.
Yeah.
White was the real promoter in that case.
Yeah, he put millions into that development.
Okay, so I know Burbank in Focus has a podcast about this, but this attendee wants to know if you can tell them about the pumpkin building on Magnolia.
Ooh, fun. One of our favorite things.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, my father-in-law, who's grew up in Burbank, he worked in Burbank during World War II, worked in the Vega munitions, Vega factory in Burbank. He doesn't remember the pumpkin building at all, but it was there until the 50s. It stood at the corner of Magnolia and Hollywood Way, more or less
where Rite Aid is, the actual Rite Aid building, not directly on the corner, but back a ways.
And if you go to Burbankia, type in pumpkin in the Google search, you'll see it started out in the 1930s as a speakeasy, as an inn. It was the Pumpkin Inn. I think it was a paint store. There was a real estate company there. It turned into a church, and it was various things at various eras. So that's the story of the Burbank Celebrate. Oh, and there wasn't just a pumpkin building, by the way. There was also a mushroom building in Burbank. Apparently It was a cafe. It was a giant mushroom, and under the mushroom, the fungus, there was a stand where you could get burgers
and stuff, fries and shakes. Kind of like a drive up.
That was a thing in California, making buildings after really strange things like derby hats and hot dogs and whatnot, mushrooms, pumpkins.
Okay, so this question is from the library. Looking back at Burbank, what, in your opinion, was the golden age of our city?
That depends on. Yeah, you're going to ask a couple of baby boomers this. Yeah, that the answer to that question is heavily dependent upon who you are and when you were born, because there are people alive in Burbank right now. This is their golden age. And then there are babies being born that their golden age is going to be the Burbank's 120th, 130th, whatever it is. For me, I could tell you exactly, because when Mike and I were putting together, what was it, the second book, we were talking about what things could you do in Burbank in a certain year that you could still do. And I came up with 1965, because that's when I moved to Burbank from Silver Lake. So for me, 1965, Mike, for you?
Well, for me, it was basically through the 60s to the early 70s, in my opinion. But that's because that was my golden age, my personal golden age.
Boomers, right?
It could be said that for many, the 50s were, because there were so many groups going on back then. There were car clubs and motorcycle clubs, and like they said, there were speakeasies and all sorts of things going on back then. Then you have the original movie era. We didn't talk about a lot of the movies, but It was easy to find
1939.
around the corner from me growing up was Glenn Strange, who was the bartender in Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
Humphrey Bogart's hairdresser lived on the same block.
And don't forget, Warner Brothers was in Burbank, and they were
Yeah.
a huge power in making gangster films during the 30s and film noir. So 30s, 40s, that would have been the golden age of Hollywood.
Golden Age of Hollywood, yeah.
Typically considered to be around 1939 when Gone with the Wind came out. So, but that would have been my parents' golden age.
Yeah.
So
I think it
depends on
just
what generation
depends.
it is.
Yeah, it depends
Carolyn,
on.
you're a young woman. What would you think is the golden age of Burbank?
Good question.
It depends,
Yeah.
right?
The
I
tables
know that I
have-
figured you'd answer it with what's in your heart, and that
Yeah.
for me, I'm now involved in Burbank right now, and so right now is the golden age.
Yeah, right now, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. People out there, attendees, if you have more questions that you think of, please go to burbankia.com or to Burbank in Focus. We have lots of photos.
No, not burbankia.com.
Not burbankia.com. Sorry.
No, I never did retain that domain
Oh,
name.
sorry.
And some guy picked it up and did a really pathetic website that's subsequently dropped off. You have to go to wesclark.com.
Okay.
And then you'll see a list of all of my weird interests, including Civil War reenacting, rugby, and a bunch of other stuff. And Burbank is one of those.
Thank you for clarifying that. And we do have it in the chat. So make sure you use the right,
Yep.
right
Somebody
link.
sent that. By the way, whoever that was, thank you very much.
And thank you, Mike and Wes, for sharing your wealth of Burbank history knowledge. We really appreciate you guys helping us kick off the
Always a pleasure.
anniversary.
And
was
happy
amazing.
birthday, Burbank.
Yes, happy birthday,
Yeah,
Burbank.
happy birthday.
And to everybody out there, a recording will be available of this within 1 week. And again, when the webinar ends, all attendees will be automatically directed to an evaluation form. We would greatly appreciate your feedback to help us for future programs. And we hope you have a great night. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, Carolyn. Good night,
Bye.
Mike.
Good night, Wes.